All right. Thank you so much for attending this second open house session on balloon volunteering. Some of you may have attended the first session a few weeks back, and this was an experiment for us because, up till now, all the people who have become volunteers into iSpirit, they've come through a referral system through one of the existing volunteers. And in the first open house session, we did an experiment. We opened it up and we said anybody who wishes to be a volunteer can become part of the process. They can fill out a form. We got number of very good quality responses, and I'm very happy to share that that we've had good success, and some of the people have become balloon volunteers already. Very promising people showed up, and we were able to kind of have a conversation and figure out all the details. So that's the backstory, and now that we are enthused by this, we have a little more confidence that this can work. We are going through this process one more time. Today, again, as usual, we'll have two parts to this discussion. The first is to tell you a little bit about iSpirit, why it exists, what does it mean to be a volunteer. And then we'll have Siddharth and Priya jump in to talk about the specific volunteer challenges that are there. So this is the overall structure of this conversation. So let me jump in. I'll take maybe about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes to talk a little bit about iSpirit, why it exists, what is it all about. So iSpirit is about India. Frankly, we are deeply, focused on India as our focus, and we think there is a window for structural change that is opening up in India. And many of you will probably agree with that. I don't need to go into details. So what I would like to, however, talk about is what is this change that is precipitating this window that is opening up. And this is, some of these things are not so much in the public domain, but they animate what we do here in iSpirit. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about this. So first change is that, look, the way that you capture value is changing. If you have airlines and the aircraft company, then airlines don't capture that much of value. Aircraft companies do. So all the profitable airlines of the world put together make less money than Boeing and Airbus make in a year. And this has been true for many, many years, right? So that's an example. Pfizer, hospitals don't make so much money, but the drug discovery companies do. So Pfizer makes more money than the top 100 hospital chains of the US put together. Similarly, you have telecom operators don't make much money, but the telecom equipment companies do. So although Cisco is having a bad year, you have a situation where Cisco makes more money than the top 5 European mobile operators put together, which, by the way, includes the world's largest operator, Vodafone. It includes Telefonica. It includes some very large operators. Similarly, the IT services companies, while they make some money and that looks very promising, they make a pittance compared to what the software product companies do. So even if you take and you can compare that to Oracle profits or Microsoft profits, even if you take the leanest profits of Microsoft, which were back a few years ago, when they were in the midst of the CEO change, Microsoft, even that time, made more money than the top 20 IT services companies of the world put together, which includes Accenture and, of course, TCS and Infosys and everybody else. So the first thing you are beginning to realize is that in the value chain, there are places where lots of people get employed, and that would be Amazon retail. And then there is a place where the number of people employed is fewer, but the money that is made is a lot more, and that would be AWS, right? So this is the shift that has happened slowly and steadily over the last 35 years. And we in India have to take cognizance of this. And ideally, in India, we need both type of players. We need services companies like airlines because they provide employment, they offer a service that the country needs. But we also need an aircraft industry because that's the only way there'll be wealth creation, wealth generation, and investment back into the country. Otherwise, we will not be viable as a country as we go forward. The second thing that is happening is that even in the value chain where money is being made, there is disproportionate money that is made in some parts of that value chain, which are very strategic, that are there. So if many of you are joining using, let's say, a Windows laptop, you would know that Windows, the Microsoft and Intel make 86% of the profits in the laptop and the desktop ecosystem. And what that means is that if you make a hard disk, if you make the screen, if you make the PCB, you make the keyboards, you design it, you put it all together and you sell it, you still make only 14%. And the landlords of that ecosystem are really Microsoft and Intel. And this is very common in many other areas. That's true for the phone industry now. That's true for many industries. On this slide, we mentioned it's going to be true for cars, because when cars go EV, batteries and electronics and software would be really the places where most of the money will be made. Profit pool will be concentrated. So if you're not in those strategic places, and then you will not be viable, you'll still make some money, like our IT services companies make some money, but as a nation, you will not be as viable as would be countries that understand that the structure of the economy matters more than size, right? And this has been the case actually for a long time. We don't have the chance to go through it, but if you go back in time, Korea got this memo that this is important way back in 74. And, at that time, the per capita income was even less than Thailand. And then Thailand has done very well as an Asian tiger, but Korea is now 5.6 times Thailand's per capita income. Israel got that memo in 1988. China got it around the same time. In Japan got it even earlier, back in early 60s, 61, 62. So India never got that memo, and we believe India should get that memo. And we need to therefore focus on our product innings as we go forward. And so our central thesis as iSpirit is that every innings has its own innovation architecture. So if your goal is in the services innings, which is what we call as a second innings, where India does have the ability to create world-class services companies. Our airlines, Indigo Airlines is good. Our telcos are not bad. Our hospitals are certainly very, very good. Our IT services companies are very good. So an ability to set up world-class services organizations requires an innovation engine behind it. And that's usually to do with, process innovation, right? And people innovation. So it's about, recruiting the right people, giving them the right training so that, the point or the person who's dealing with you in Indigo gives you a good service. It's a lot about process innovation so that you can do things consistently as you go forward. Now, those are all important things, but if you want to be a product nation, then it's very important for you to adopt the innovation engine that supports that innings. And what is that innovation engine that supports that inning? And that innovation engine is what we call as a Jugalbandi kind of an innovation architecture. It involves public platforms, public research, and private innovation. Now, we can't solve as iSpirit public research, but we certainly can solve for public platforms, and we do. And we can also help people who are doing the private innovation on top of that. So our view is that India needs to adopt a new template. And that template is a Jugalbandi architecture, innovation architecture of public goods and private innovation, right? And iSpirit is trying to bring that to life by bringing, this innovation architecture to life playground by playground. So playground by playground means we'll take a problem, for example, financial inclusion, and insert into that problem, for that sake of the problem, the new innovation architecture. And that has many players. It has state as a player and it has market as a player. And so we will support both the state and the market to bring that to life. And we believe that since we are a big market, since people are fundamentally innovative in India, we have a lot of faith and belief in the caliber of an ordinary Indian. We think these playgrounds will generate compelling players. It will not only solve problems at scale, but it will also generate compelling players who will become meaningful companies as we go forward in the future. So that's really the change that we want to see happen in India. So in that context, what is iSpirit? So iSpirit, we see ourselves as nation builders to bring in this product innings of India to life. Now, product innings is needed in many, many areas. As I said, you need this in the aircraft company side, you need it in defense, you need it in electronics. We are only focused on software products. And we think of ourselves and saying, in this innings, we are the opening batsman. And if we can do this good for the software product part of this, then it will have a cascade impact on everybody else, because software has such a multiplier role to play, right? It will help us in defense, in electronics, in many, many other areas. And, for India to have self-belief, you have to see this happen somewhere, right? And so iSpirit is trying to bring that first innings, first opening batsman of the first of this third innings to life, right? So that's the way to think of it. So we focus on a bunch of playgrounds where software products, this kind of thinking has a big role to play. And that is to do with financial inclusion, health inclusion. You'll hear a little bit about that. We built up our muscles by doing a baby version of that for mid-market SaaS earlier. So we've been at it for a number of years. So essentially, we see ourselves as building these playgrounds. You can read more about this at our blog post called Playgrounds Coda. We then help both the market players as well as state players inside that. Now, how do we do it? And that's what makes iSpirit different. Everything that we do is done by volunteers. So we are just a collection of volunteers, right? And we call it no greed, no glory volunteering, right? And now that may sound a little bit of a radical proposition, but obviously it isn't. iSpirit is a living testament to that. But iSpirit itself is inspired by other such volunteer organizations that have come up in the past. The one that you probably are most familiar with would be Wikipedia, but also the open source software movement is a very good example of that. So we are inspired by all of those things. And iSpirit at the core, if you see, is really a volunteer kind of a model. So now, luckily for us, all this is working. We've been as I said, we tried this with mid-market SaaS first. That's worked. We were responsible for helping the market players adopt desk marketing and selling. We used to do lots of playbook roundtables around that. Then we created something called SaaSX that's gone on to become a commercial kind of a model now called SaaS Bhumi. And that SaaS drive that you see and read about in the press, actually originated inside iSpirit. But we also learned from that we need to be disciplined about how to build a playground, right? And it's very important. So we focused on that with financial inclusion, credit democratization, and the public goods that were created to make that happen are collectively called India Stack. And I'm not going to go into the details. I am hoping that many of you have seen this picture that you see, the Rajni slide, as to what this is all about. The inside stuff is what Rajni does. The middle stuff is what the market players do. And the outer stuff is all of India Stack components or building blocks that were built to help the market players solve for somebody like Rajni. And this is, many of those building blocks have done extraordinarily well. And we are at a point where this is significantly making a dent. Some of you who pay attention to this may have noticed that in December, Bank of International Settlements, the central bank to central banks, issued a paper saying that the India model is the model for the world. Now, they are not the only one. A couple of weeks back, or was it only last week, Singapore FinTech Festival invited Bill Gates to attend. And what does Bill Gates do? He goes to Singapore, in Singapore FinTech Festival, say, hey, if you're there, you got to learn from somebody, go and learn from the Indians, right? So there are many people who have woken up to this impact that this is making, and it is making a big difference as we go forward. And as I said, all of this happens in the hands of volunteers, and which is why we are here. And, but before I talk about, how can you be a volunteer here, I want to mention that our volunteer model is hard. It's really, really hard, right? We work on things that have a 5 year, 10 year, 20 year time frame. So, you don't get, many times you will not get uh, the satisfaction of seeing what you're working on come to life right away. And so it's really hard. It's sometimes lonely. It's, of course, as we say, no greed, no glory. We give the greed to the marketplace. We give the glory to the policymakers. And so it's very few people are able to do this. So it is a small club, and we think it will remain a small club as we go forward. So our goal is to be about 100 active volunteers at any time. We are roughly there even today. And why don't we want it to be bigger? Because at less than the Dunbar's limit, the social compact, which keeps it no greed, no glory, stays in place, right? And that's the best way for us to kind of make it happen. Second reason why it's tough is because we want self-managed volunteers. We don't have program managers. We want volunteers who make a promise, a soft promise that they will keep. And traditionally in a corporate environment, you'll have a program manager. If one of you has said, I will finish this by Friday next week, then somebody will ping you and say, hey, Friday is coming up, today's Thursday, are you ready, right? Or they will ping you after Friday and say, hey, what happened, are you ready? In our system, we don't have that program managers at all. And so one of the most important criteria for us is that, do you self-manage, right? And so it's very, very important for you to do that. And of course, we work on things that are leapfrog in nature. Inevitably, the stuff that we are working on is out of fashion when we are working on it. It is not fashionable when we are working on it. And I'll give you an example. Even when UPI came out, now of course UPI is very successful. We had done our first kind of market engagement on 11th of February 2016. 321 people attended. Only one of them was a VC. So we went to him and said, hey, where are your other colleagues? And he embarrassed. Alok Goyal of SAFE was that person. And he said, no, no, even I'm here because I'm an ex-Googler. And so we said, but why are the VCs not there? We went and spoke to them. And without exception, they said, no, this doesn't look like the China payment system, doesn't look like Visa, MasterCard. How can it be successful? We don't want to be involved in it. And so you have this situation where often what we are working on, since it's built on first principles, it is not fashionable to people at large, right? Because our innovation architecture usually has rewarded copy paste, and we don't believe in copy paste. And so therefore it requires courage of conviction that comes from your ability to think from first principles. So that's really very important. The third part which is important is that what's in it for you. If there's no greed and no glory, then why volunteer at all, right? And the reason for volunteering, which is very, very important, is that we want people who believe that by volunteering they can become the best version of themselves. So we have this concept that in your day job, you are in a run bhumi, you are in a battlefield. But to be successful in that battlefield, there are some aspects of you that you need to develop, which can only be developed in the rang bhumi, theater stage, equivalent of that, where you are only competing with yourself. So to be the best competitive marathon runner, you need strong muscles, but you also need an ability to deal with pain. And to be the best tennis player, you need to have great timing and strength in the shots that you play, but you also need the ability to stay calm under stress. So this calm under stress, ability to deal with pain, these are inner metrics that are there, and they are best cultivated in places where you're not competing with others, you're only competing with yourself. And so that's the kind of place that iSpirit is. And so it's very important for us to get people who think like this, have a philosophy like this as they go forward. So, so really, that's a little bit about, why iSpirit exists, what is our theory of change, and what kind of volunteers are we looking for. So I've spent about 20 or so minutes talking about this. If any of you have a question on this, please feel free to fire it in the Q&A section. I'm guessing that that is open for people to put in a question, right, Karthik? Is that true?
Correct, Sharad.
Yeah. So
We've not created a form to collect the questions.
But put it in the Q&A. Yeah.
Yes.
Here. And if you have a question, feel free towards the end. If we have time, we'll be happy to answer this. And so really, we're going to shift gears now and talk a little bit about the the kind of volunteer challenges that are there. And we're going to talk about two sheets of volunteer challenges. The first sheet is going to be covered by Sid, and the second one by Priya. So with that, let me hand it over to Sid.
So building off what Sharad outlined, out here I'll essentially run you guys through a set of open technical challenges that we're looking for volunteers, and then Priya will pick off from where I leave it at to deep dive on the health inclusion side and the set of challenges out there that exist and the class of volunteers that we're looking for. The first challenge is presenceless and paperless. And what this essentially means is there are two parts to it. The first part relates to KYC. How does a business entity, a legal entity, whether that's a sole proprietor, whether that's a partnership, or whether that's a private limited company and beyond, how do they digitally authenticate themselves and prove their identity and share that KYC information of both the individuals behind that entity, which might be the directors behind a private limited company, the partners behind a partnership, as well as information of the entity itself, which would be the private limited company itself or the partnership itself, with any other third party. So this could be used in the case of sharing it with a bank for opening of a current account or a savings account, sharing it with a lender for obtaining a working capital loan, or sharing it with even other telecom providers for a business connection. So therefore, how do they do this KYC in a completely digital manner without any physical intervention, which is currently how it is today? India has solved for KYC for individuals, and so therefore using the eKYC infrastructure that's powered by Aadhaar that Sharad spoke about, you can electronically share your KYC information. That's what you would have experienced when you got a Jio SIM card or opened a bank account or a mutual fund account. But how do we now solve for this completely digitally for legal entities? And the other side of the coin really relates to digital authorization. So once you've KYC'd an entity and they've availed a service, they subsequently need to accept the terms and conditions, accept the contract that you're giving them. And that acceptance, that authorization of a contract requires, for example, let's say it is a loan contract, then it requires the lender to know who is the director that's signing this loan contract. Is the director valid? Is that director a valid director in that company? Is that director authorized on behalf of that company to sign that loan contract, and so on? So how do we go about building that digital authorization chain that they may then use, whether it's a partnership, whether it's a private limited company or other types of legal entities, that they can use to digitally sign all sorts of contracts, whether that might be a loan agreement, opening of an account, other terms of service, and so on. And these essentially then what it does is it enables bringing the same paperless, presenceless experience that today is accessible to individuals. It makes it accessible to the MSMEs in India at scale. The second is the PM WANI ecosystem build out. So you may have read in the news recently that the cabinet approved a project called the Wireless Access Network Interface, and the Prime Minister even tweeted about it. And for some of you who may have remembered, this has been in the works for a few years now. TRAI, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, about I think 2 or 3 years back, put out a consultation paper on WANI. Essentially, what WANI did is think of it similar to the PCO revolution that happened in India. What WANI did is we have a lot of fiber being laid across the country. You've got BharatNet laying it across villages, north, south, east, west, but no one has solved for the last mile connectivity, right? Which is that last mile, putting the router, buying the hardware, putting the router, getting the electricity, ensuring that power remains creating the software interface for consumers to log onto it, and then servicing it. And because it's completely bundled today, it is not cost effective for telecom companies or any other players in the ecosystem to build that end-to-end last mile chain. And as a result, we have very poor, we are one of the worst penetrations in terms of public Wi-Fi hotspots in the world. And this creates, of course, in the time of COVID, further issues because a lot of people do not have access to high bandwidth wireless connections, whether that takes a form of 3G and 4G in various hinterlands. But there are various fiber lines that are deployed at the edges. And if those could be made wireless, then that's hugely powerful. And if those could be sachetized, so that, imagine a rickshaw driver, he finishes his trip, stops at the local shop for chai, he's able to then purchase a 1 rupee or 2 rupee payment sachet that he can use to log on to the Wi-Fi, check his WhatsApp. He's finished with his chai. 7 rupees chai, 3 rupees is his Wi-Fi coupon. And then once he's done with it, he goes ahead with his next set of rides using any consumer app of his choice. So this required unbundling. It required unbundling the payment services. And that's now possible because of a system like UPI that enables these sachetized low ticket transactions at scale, 1 rupee, 3 rupees, 5 rupees, 10 rupees. It required unbundling of the consumer app itself. So consumers could log on to this wireless network through any app. It could be a Paytm, WhatsApp, PhonePe, any app of your choice. And if you buy a packet of Wi-Fi that is interoperable at any hotspot in the country, and it's not just limited to that hotspot that, say, an app may have partnered with traditionally. It required unbundling of the hardware side, which was your router, and it required unbundling on the software side that allowed for any individual to talk to that router, not coupled to the same access point interface that exists. So this unbundled architecture is what TRAI put out in a public consultation. They also did a pilot. Lots of companies participated in that pilot, Wi-Fi Dabba, Y Combinator Back Company, and many others, Wi-Fire, and so on. And at the culmination of a pilot, there was a report published. You guys should take a look. And then finally, 2 years later, and as Sharad mentioned, some of this is long, grueling effort with very long periods of delayed gratification. 2 years later, the cabinet has now approved it for a national rollout. And so therefore, we are looking for individuals that would help drive the evangelization of this ecosystem build out, bringing together these different players that I spoke about so that you can have a successful Wi-Fi transaction at a range of all sorts of small stores and beyond in the country. The third challenge, and this is non-technical actually, is around the economic framework for digital public goods. So if you take a look at the PHR system, the public health record system that was announced, you've got the consent manager, gateway, you've got bridges that enable people to come onto this network, you've got bridges that enable people to consume data as part of this network. And for what would be the underlying business model for each of these entities? What would be the business model that ensures the consent managers are truly incentive aligned to work for the user and they don't go down the path of becoming rogue intermediaries? What is the business model that ensures that you have innovation on one end, but at the same time, so you have sufficient money coming in that promotes innovation, but at the same time, the fees do not become a barrier of entry and hence scales out as a public utility across the country. So therefore, that first principles thinking around this notion of digital public goods is important, and we were looking for volunteers in that regard. The next challenge is around the new use cases of DAPA. For those of you that have been following iSpirit's work, DAPA is the data empowerment and protection architecture, essentially what's more commonly seen as the consent layer of India stack, and relates to how do you give individuals and businesses control of their financial, health, telecom, and other socioeconomically valuable data. As this has been rolling out, and Priya will talk to you in the next session about more details on the health rollout, but this has been rolling out in the financial sector, telecom, and many other sectors. What we are also seeing is a lot of interest coming in for leveraging the same consent framework for agricultural data and for other private data sets as well. These are data sets that are part of any internet application that you and I use that are unregulated today. So how would that consent framework apply? How would users interact with it? What would be those use cases that come out of it? Who would be the market players that would participate in this transaction? Just like you had banks that were data providers, you had account aggregators that were consent managers in the financial space. In these two sectors of agricultural data and private data, who would those players be? So thinking through that, we're looking for a set of volunteers. The next challenge is OCIN, the technical standards and ecosystem build out. So and I'd strongly, for those of you that are not familiar with OCIN, suggest that you take a look at the iSpirit Open House discussions. Just Google OCIN Open House discussions. There are a range of them, 4 or 5 probably, and do take a look to get a deep dive into what it is. But the very simple explanation for it is just like UPI was an open API for payments, account aggregator and PHR open APIs for data, OCIN is an open API for cash flow credit. Now, in that regard, it's an open standard. You can find it on the iSpirit website, and it's published on GitHub as well. And this standard needs evolution, and there's evolution in terms of how do you make it more configurable. Given any loan application that comes in, how do lenders auto-configure their backend systems to accommodate different KYC workflows, repayment workflows, data sharing workflows, collection and monitoring workflows, and so on. And so therefore, thinking through those aspects from a technical standpoint. And then from a market standpoint, what we're seeing is, and as we had shared in the open house discussion, there are 2 LSPs, 2 loan service providers. These are the entities that consumers interact with to obtain a loan, and on the back end, they interact with all the lenders. So an LSP, you can imagine, could be Zomato, Swiggy, GST, the government e-marketplace, GEMS. And as we had shared in the open house discussion, the 2 LSPs, reference LSPs that are going live are Sahay GEMS and Sahay GST. And as these go live, in the coming days, it's critical that the next wave of LSPs and market players also get activated. And therefore, if anyone's interested in contributing from an evangelization standpoint and working with these market players, working with technology vendors in the space that enable either LSPs or lenders to come on board based on these technical standards, please do reach out. And the last challenge is essentially around the plumbing layer of the health stack. What was announced on 15th August was essentially, as part of the National Digital Health Mission, was the doctor and provider registry. And it's critical as we move towards becoming more and more digitally enabled from a healthcare standpoint. And Priya will talk about why that's critical, because we want to move India towards a wellness-driven system that requires early detection, that requires the right infrastructure to be set up for early detection. A crucial piece in that is creating the right master data in the ecosystem to establish trust. And just like we didn't have the right master data for providers, we didn't have the right master data for doctors, and that's now being solved for. Today, we don't have the right master data for drugs in the country. As we have a large generics market, it's extremely difficult to uniquely identify a drug, identify variants of that drug. And this is a challenge faced across the supply chain. If you ask a pharmacist, given a particular drug, what are other variants available to them? By that same company or by alternate companies that use the same pharmaceutical molecule at the back end, pharmacological molecule at the back end. It's a very difficult question to answer, often done manually. And this creates a whole host of issues. This also creates issues where, if you're looking at it, so one is supply chain issues, whether it's a retailer, wholesaler, distributor. Second is it also creates issues when, let's say, you're a doctor prescribing drugs, and if I don't have a structured way to know what are the other medicines and drugs you are on, then there's no way I can prevent, for example, drug mix-ups from happening. And let's say a drug I prescribe could actually add on to, the side effects of other drugs and make the condition even worse. So some of those errors, unless we structure that, create the right master data around drugs and make each of them uniquely identifiable across the chain, we'll have a lot of issues as you develop applications on top, like e-prescriptions, and make those part of PHR and then make that shareable. So one part is thinking through the design of the drug registry. And the second is on, the technical design of the claims engine. As we want to move, like I said earlier, India towards a wellness-oriented society, That means you need to encourage people to do more checkups, to be far more proactive. If the cost of a checkup today is 300 rupees, let's say on average when you go to a doctor, but the cost of processing that claim is 1500 rupees because it's completely paper based, then there's no way insurers are going to cover it. If insurers aren't going to cover it, you're not going to have a lot of people sign up for it at scale. And therefore, it's essential, much like eKYC, dramatically lowered the cost of doing a KYC, and that created new financial products on top, sachetized products on top. It's important that we engineer a similar evolution when it comes to claims processing, and to reduce the order of claims processing, the cost of claims processing down to a few rupees. And if that's the case, you can now have all these niche insurance packages being created that incentivize people to take a health checkup. You could imagine, going to the pharmacy in the near future, sharing your e-prescription, the pharmacist going inside, getting the right set of medicines, you subsequently sharing your insurance policy, authorizing the claim that it's raised in real time, and then using the real-time payment rails that India has, the money is settled instantly into the pharmacist's account before you even leave the shop, right? So therefore, thinking through that claims engine, how would it interact with insurers, TPAs, and various other players in the ecosystem? How would auto adjudication of these decisions take place in over 99% of scenarios, leaving out the exceptions? And so if anyone's interested in thinking through those components of the claims engine, the workflow, the data schema, converting insurance policies into structured data, converting claims and other associated health data that comes as a part of it into a structured form, and then computing, adjudicating on top of it, please do reach out. So these are broadly the set of mostly technical challenges, and a few of them are market-oriented challenges that exist. And if any of you are interested in volunteering, at the end of this presentation, there'll be a link to a form. Please do sign up for that, and look forward to hearing from you. So with that, I'll hand it over to Priya.
So let me start off on the volunteering opportunities with health inclusion. My name is Priya Karnik, and I work on the market engagement for HealthStack. Before we move on to the opportunity section, I'll give you a quick recap of what HealthStack is. And Siddharth had mentioned many of these aspects. And we have a lot of blog open sessions on the iSpirit blog, which are dedicated to, which give you the summary of the HealthStack as well as focus on the individual components. So if you haven't had a chance to go through that, I would strongly encourage you to go through those open sessions and the blogs to get a good perspective of what iSpirit is planning to do in the HealthStack. I'll spend a minute speaking about HealthStack, so that you have the context when I'm speaking about the projects on what HealthStack is. So our objective is to build the world's first digital health nation with high quality, affordable healthcare for all. If you look at healthcare systems around the world, two things are very clear to us. One, getting all three right is an extremely hard problem. And two, if we want to have any shot at getting any of these right, we need to look at a digital solution, a strong digital spine for the healthcare system in the country. Now, with that objective, as Siddharth alluded to in his conversation, we are working on two folds on HealthStack. One, with the strong digital spine, increase the capacity and efficiency of the healthcare delivery system. To move the healthcare delivery system from a very highly curative, transaction oriented to a longitudinal wellness focused system. And what is our vision? What will the HealthStack really enable once it comes to life? And I'll put them in three buckets. One, every Indian will have a digital personal health records, which is really their treatment history, their diagnostic history captured in a digital format in a single place. And it is not something that you're, and truly empowers the patient with personal health records. And Siddharth spoke about account aggregators and the DAPA framework, and leveraging similar framework, same framework. how do we make this personal health records transferable with the patient consent for various purposes between institutions when you move from one institution to another institution for treatment, and it could be used for various other purposes like clinical research and second opinions and so on and so forth. Now, if everyone has a patient personal health records and this data is digitized, there are a number of ways in which healthcare can improve. One is, of course, better quality of healthcare, because the doctor who is treating the patient has all the information and is not relying on incorrect reports. There are other aspects leveraging either patient consent based information, or could be aggregate and anonymized data sets that could lead to more AI driven startups to bring about solutions that can augment the capacity of the doctors, better clinical research, better public health data with these anonymized data sets. So the data with PHR and the transferability of PHR is going to not only transform the customer experience with either a telemedicine or the fact that you have data in electronic format, but it is also going to improve the health outcomes both on the public and the private side. So that's number one, personal health records, or PHR for short, and we'll be using this a lot in in this discussion. The second area, and Siddharth spoke about it, so I'll keep it really short, is how do you streamline the insurance payments in the country to make claims process very seamless, so that lower fraud, better data can bring about increased insurance penetration and the ability to have with data innovative products, which one among them could be OPD insurance. The third is the quality of healthcare at large, from prevention to the seamless transition from a prevention to a curative to a post-treatment care, and the number of innovations that can result by bringing all of these things together. Part of this, as the health stack, what we call as the plumbing layer, which you will see in the open session, we are building three components: personal health records and the ability to, with real time, with patient consent, to transfer the personal data from one institution to another. That's number one. Number two is the claims engine piece, which I spoke about. The third is the doctor registry and registries for various actors in the ecosystem, so we know who the players are. Now, these components have already been released as a mini reference implementation, as Siddharth mentioned, by the National Digital Health Mission, and pilot is underway in the Union Territories. So from a iSpirit perspective, the problems that we are working on, and there are several, and we can, I'll speak about the projects. When we look at actors in the ecosystem, there we have doctors, hospitals, consumers, the healthcare professionals other than the doctors. And we have various projects going on to understand how health stack can influence, can change the life of these players, and how can we then get these actors or stakeholders to adopt healthcare, so the consumer can benefit. So of the 4 projects that I'm going to speak about, the first, there are 2 which are focused on doctors, one which is focused on allied health professionals or para workers, as we call them, and the third is really a consumer narrative for health stack. So the first project, which is Project Paladi, it focuses on how do we get doctors to love digital practice. And we have an entire generation that moved from thinking about desktop, web to mobile first. And and how do we get that kind of a thinking among doctors, especially the younger doctors who want to start their digital practice? And that is a combination of a number of things, which are the practices which are conducive to a more digital practice. How will what components of the health stack, existing health stack components can be used? What new health stack components have to be developed? So if you look at during the pandemic, there are a number of practices. So for example, if you're looking at yoga teachers, art teachers, dance teachers, adopting a completely digital practice for their interaction with their students. So similarly, how do we get doctors to think about a digital practice? And that's Project Paladi. So we encourage volunteers in this area to look at, again, this is a non-technical piece to begin with, because we need to have a deeper understanding of what the market is, and get a great perspective of what is it that doctors look at, and how what kind of practice is suitable for a digital consultation, and is there any element of the physical practice that we need to look at digitizing. That's Project Paladi. The second doctor project that I'm a doctor focused area is EHR adoption. Doctors, the perception is that doctors are averse to technology, and that's not the case. Our hypothesis is that doctors will adopt any technology if it substantially increases their experience from their present solution. And therefore, our hypothesis is that to drive PHR, to drive all these digital transformations that we are talking about, we need doctors to adopt EHR in the clinical setting. And it has two components. How do doctors or anyone get information in EHR? And subsequently, how do they leverage? And how do we make it substantially better than the current experience that they have? So we need someone to look at this space very with a fresh insight, get a lot of information from the existing practices, what new developments has happened, and what is it that we can do in this space. So that's Project Paladin and EHR adoption. The third project is about knowledge grid for allied health professionals or para workers. One of the promises of technology is that we will be able to create a new class of health professionals, and also upgrade the existing or upscale the existing healthcare, the last mile healthcare workers, because the supply gap in India is a problem, and therefore we need technology to augment the capacity of the system. And knowledge grid is a project. It's a concept of connecting people for sharing tacit knowledge. So for example, if you're an ASHA worker, ASHA workers are people who go in areas to the patient's house and administer healthcare, specific set of healthcare services. And if an ASHA worker, for example, needs information, how can she quickly connect to someone? It could be her peer, another ASHA worker, or the primary healthcare center that she is affiliated to, another doctor that she is in connect with. So how do we make this knowledge flow across the system? So the entire segment of para workers are upskilled, and that is the project of knowledge grid. Very early stages, so we need more volunteers to think about user experience, what is it, how will the system look like, how will the system learn, how can it be better than existing solutions, why not a chat? So there are a number of challenges in developing this, so we would encourage volunteers to work on this. The last one that I have is Mother Dairy, and for those of you who are from let me take Delhi, is the Mother Dairy is a name given to something that transformed the consumer experience for an everyday item like milk, and it substantially changed the experience of the consumer buying milk. So in our health stack story, it is all about the ultimately the consumer being made feel good about healthcare, and the experience that the consumer or the patient experiences for healthcare. Now, while insurance is one element that can move the needle for changing that experience for healthcare, our hypothesis again is that there is going to be a substantial percentage of the population who, for various reasons, it could be not trusting insurance, not seeing enough value in insurance, who would tend to remain uninsured. So for those people who rely on out-of-pocket expenses, where a claims engine, where anything that you do on policy markup, anything will not make a difference, how do we set the narrative for these consumers? And that is purely going to be on a dramatic improvement in healthcare experience without having the insurance component. So that is the Mother Dairy project, and we need volunteers who can don the consumer mindset and look at the health stack and understand the health stack deeply, and set a narrative for Mother Dairy. Health Stack, our journey started in 2015.
Yeah.
With a lot of these efforts, we've come a long way with the the Prime Minister launching the Health Stack, not Health Stack, Health ID. But we have a lot more to go, and we need a lot of volunteers for this project. I'll stop here, Sharad.
Thank you so much, Priya. Priya, if you can go to the next slide, while you're flashing it, it'll be easiest. So really, iSpirit is a bunch of people who are builders coming together. I wanted to tell you, how to think about volunteering. So we don't pick volunteers. We don't actually do a selection. We have a system where anybody can try out volunteering. That tryout phase is called balloon volunteering. So why is it called balloon volunteering? And colloquially, is because it's like you have a neighbor, they have a child, they're organizing a birthday party for the child. You go there and say, hey, can I help? And the person will say, hey, do you mind putting up a few balloons? So that's really getting a chance to see what the ethos of that party is. And our sense is that if you balloon volunteer, you get a sense of what volunteering is. And then you can decide, and similarly, iSpirit can decide whether or not volunteering is for you. Volunteering is for very few people. And so very few people can operate in this flat hierarchy, be self-managed, assert leadership, have this bold kind of a mindset of making change happen or rewriting the script of the nation. So it's a hard thing. And so, but we are happy to have you try it out. And if you fill out the form, then what will happen is that one of the iSpiriters will reach out to you. We will first want to make sure you've read the volunteer handbook. You have a basic understanding of volunteering is about, and you're investing some time to understand what iSpirit is about. And once that is the case, then some anchor volunteer will work with you to discuss what could be a balloon volunteering challenge that you could work on. We'll not give it to you. It's not an assignment. It's something you get to pick amongst the available things that are there. Try it out. For some people, it works out the first time. Some people say, hey, I didn't enjoy this. Let me try something else. So they'll pick something else. And so we let you go through the system. Sometimes it takes 2 months, 20 months. There have been cases when it's even longer, where people are figuring it out. And at some point in time, when they know, or iSpirit, both sides know that this makes sense, you are comfortable with this, then you actually become a volunteer. So that's the process that is there. How do you do this? Most of our volunteers are part-time volunteers. A few of them are full-time. They come in for a few years to only be doing full-time volunteering. But everybody starts as a balloon volunteer initially. So if you're a part-time volunteer, as most of our volunteers are, how do you manage time, right? And we have a very, very simple process. We want you to make promises that you can keep. Make soft promises that you can keep. So if 1 week you can spend 6 hours, another week you can spend only 1, then make promises accordingly. So the onus is on you. We don't track hours. We don't have any other system. We just want you to make promises that you can keep. And if you have a wedding coming up in the family, don't make promises taking that into account. And there's no shame for you to scale back your promises, or and since there's no shame associated with it, it's easy to do and adjust your life alongside it. And that system has worked for us very well. But we do expect everybody to be a thought leader, everybody to be a builder of some kind of a public good or the other, either a playbook or a market catalyst or a policy or a platform. And that's the mindset that we have. It's a very flat system on the inside. And so I'm going to end here. We are kind of out of time. And I think I've answered both the questions that had come up in the Q&A kind of a window. And we are hoping that if you're interested, you will try this out. This is a new experiment that we are doing, and we are open to having balloon volunteers come in, without a referral, and we will be happy to try this out and see where it goes. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and wishing you all the best. Thank you so much.